the Vermont Division for the Blind and Visually Impaired, DBVI, and the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, VABVI, held the Great Expectations Event and Technology Fair on April 14, 2023 in Montpelier. Thank you to Keynote Speaker Kyle Robidoux, who started the event with his presentation.
Kyle is currently the Assistant Director of the Mayor of Boston's Office of Housing Stability. Previously, he worked with the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired at Boston's City Council President's Office. Kyle will run his 9th Boston Marathon on Monday and has completed 5 100-mile ultra races to date. Kyle is the board president of Friendship Works and spent 7 years as an appointed member of the Boston Disability Commission. Kyle is a sponsored athlete with Athletic Brewing Company, Ultimate Direction, and Topo Athletic. He lives in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston with his wife, daughter, and cat, Cuddles. Let's give Kyle a warm welcome.
So excellent. Well, first, thank you for the very kind introduction. It's almost like I wrote that, but I appreciate you sharing the comments with me. And I also just want to give a shout out and thank, events like this don't happen by magic. They happen with a tremendous amount of work and effort and commitment to our community. And I would like to thank the folks from DBVI and VABVI for your time and effort and the staff who put this together. And as Melissa mentioned, I kind of feel like home in a sense being here because I worked for the Mass Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired for a number of years, and we also have the Mass Commission for the Blind, which is the state division. So I'm very familiar with misappropriating and acronyms and so forth, and also very appreciative of the work that you all do. So I wanted to share a little bit about kind of where I'm at as an athlete and as a person and in a career-wise, and I feel like when I share thoughts around my running, usually the first comment that folks say is like, wow, 100 miles. Like, why run 100 miles? Why not just a mile? Why not 5 miles? And I think it's a really fair question. And I also want to say that just being outdoors, being active, doing anything is really important, whether that's walking a block or two, or going snowshoeing, or riding a bike, or choosing to put yourself through a lot of pain and agony in running 100 miles. But I do it for a number of reasons. And I do it, one of the biggest reasons is that it is connected to my vision, right? So I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa at the age of 11, declared legally blind at 19. And in between those 2 points, my way of coping and dealing with my vision loss or my potential vision loss was really not dealing with it. I didn't think about it. I pushed it away, tucked it in this really dark place, partly because that's what I was taught to do by my father and by my family members. Really didn't discuss it much. So I spent a fair amount of time just ignoring it and pushing it off. And I was active in sports growing up. Every ball sport I played, because I did have a fair amount of usable vision then. And just so folks know, I do have, I have corrected 20/60 vision now with about a 2 or 3% field of vision, give or take on the day. So that's how I kind of moved through space. And I didn't realize until my late 20s where I started becoming really angry and frustrated that all these things I really loved doing, including skiing here in Vermont and running, I felt that all these things were being taken away from me. And my now wife at the time, or my now wife, not wife at the time, told me, I don't think she's here, so I get a pass on that one. I actually think she's out running. I realized through her that, she mentioned that I was just really angry all the time. And it took me a minute to figure out that that was based on my vision loss. And so I also decided at that point in time and I share honestly with this, particularly if there are young people in the room or folks who are transitioning and trying to grapple with your vision loss. And I want to be very clear in stating that although there are similarities in vision loss and kind of the spectrum of vision loss and that journey that we all experience, there are similarities, but there are inherent differences. So when I talk about my experience, I don't talk about it in the sense that it was easier or more difficult. It was just different, right? But for folks who are experiencing that, I took the step and I went to therapy and I started meeting with someone And they confirmed that, like, wow, you are an angry, bitter person. And I was like, great, I'm glad we get that out of the way. So at least I know I'm paying you for something. And after a period of time, he started working with me, and I realized that my anger was really rooted in this concept that I created in my mind that things were being taken away from me. What I realized through that therapy is that I was giving up on things, right? There's ways to continue to do what you want to do, but you just have to adapt. So I was able to slowly get back to the place where I fell back in love with skiing, and a huge shout out to Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. I started skiing with them and I immediately fell back in love, and I ski with them a lot. I think I bankroll most of their programs right now. And I met some wonderful people in this room through Vermont Adaptive. So I started falling back in love with skiing and all these other things. And like I said, I realized that it's not about things being taken away from you, but it's a choice that you may be making to give up on those things. And I really encourage folks to think about things that are being frustrated and that you're challenged with, and you do have a choice to make. And I hope that you surround yourself with a network and skills through organizations and associations like the folks who put this on to kind of build and address those challenges. So I started running, and yes, the easy thing would have just been to run a couple miles, but I started running marathons, and then I started running with guides because I was falling too much in marathons, and someone said to me, like, hey, have you ever run with a guide? And I was like, wow, really cool concept. I still fall with guides, and they get really embarrassed, and I'm like, well, that means we're pushing and we're working hard. But one of the reasons why I love doing ultra races and 100-mile races is that they, for me, mimic life and this journey that we go through life. And I can no longer really see people head nod, so maybe just snap your fingers, but snap your fingers if you've lived a perfect life. All right, someone in the room always does that, which is great, and I appreciate it, right? Because one, we define perfect in different ways, right? And perfect means a lot of different things. But when I think about a perfect life, I think about the privilege that I grew up in and where I'm at today. And it's taken me a lot of time to figure out that things are not perfect. And we have to really figure out how to build skills, whether it's in the workforce and looking for jobs, or relationships, or running, or athletics, or whatever it may be. We need to build skills on how to adapt and how to recognize moments that we've hit those lows and how to push through those lows. And there are no lows that I have experienced deeper than being 80 miles into a 100-mile race, one, realizing that, oh man, I have 20 more miles to go, this is awful. You can't touch any body part because it's chafed. You can't put down food because the minute you do, you throw it back up. Your legs are tired, your mind is tired, you go into this dark place. But then, for some reason, you start to move through that, and you just keep moving forward, and maybe walking. It literally may be walking a step, sitting down for 10 minutes, maybe taking a nap trailside, and then continuing to do it. But you keep on pushing forward. And for me, that's life, right? That is life, whether it's experiencing vision loss or trying to go after a job that you really want, or a relationship, or a piece of technology that you just can't figure out how to maximize and how to use. You have to embrace those lows to get to those highs. And for me, running 100-mile ultra races, and I'm certain there are easier ways to do it. Maybe I should go back to therapy to think about it that way. There are certainly easier ways to do it, but it mimics that. And folks often ask, like, wow, I can't believe you just ran 100 miles. What a great experience. And that sometimes takes 23 hours or it may take 28 hours. And although every race, whether it's a 5K or a bike race or a fun charity ride, you don't show up and just do it, right? Well, some people do, and they're great athletes, or they have more stamina or talent than I do. But one of the other things I love about ultramarathon running or training is training, right? Is the piece around you put in the work and you show up that day. And that, to me, is goal setting and setting really high bars. And that's the same in all walks of life, right? Whatever you want, for most of us, it's not going to come easy. And you have to think critically about, how do I put together that plan to get to it? And for running, that plan literally starts with, I'm going to run 5 miles today, maybe 3 miles the next day, and you just start building. You build more time in your feet, more miles. You learn how to adapt with your eating and your fueling, so you continue to eat and run. And those are just like the skills and the goal setting that we all talk about, particularly in the employment space, right? If you want this job, here are the skills you need to learn in this current job. But if you want to run a 100-miler and you run 10 miles, here's what you have to do between 10 and 100. And you really have to put in effort and train for that. And that's one of the things I really love about running in general is the goal setting piece of it. And I am incredibly honest with you, and I am thankful, and I've worked hard, and I've been dealt a couple really great breaks in my professional career. And I'm excited about where I am, but I also know, thinking back 20 years, that I've put in the time and effort to think about where I want to be and how to get there. And I've set up mentors, I've been a mentor, but I also have worked with folks who have helped guide me. And you lean on places like VDBI and Vermont Association for the Blind and other employment counselors and rehab counselors to help build that foundation and that, what we call in the running world, that base, right? You need to build a base of skills to then take that next step. I love being surrounded by people who are outside enjoying things that I want to do. I love it so much that some of my guides, so I do run with sighted guides, some of my guides tease me. They're like, you will literally slow down if it means getting to talk to someone. And I'm like, hell yeah. Like, if I'm gonna be out here for 24 hours in the dark, in the middle of the woods, you're the only person that I'm relying on to get from A to B, I'm gonna talk to whoever comes across, right? So, and I love embracing that piece of it. And I love the camaraderie, the support. I love how guides help me. They turn running into a team sport, where it's really an individual sport. And I love being out in the trails with friends who we're sharing similar goals and we're pushing each other, motivating each other to get out to that piece. And like everyone else in the world, you know, the past couple of years have been really challenging for building networks and connecting, and more importantly, reconnecting with the individuals who we find give us inspiration and joy being around. And I've also experienced that reconnecting piece both in my playtime in skiing and running, but also in the workforce, right? You got to cultivate relationships and build your networks. And I think when we think about reconnecting in this world that we're living in right now, there are a lot of great things, and much respect to the technology folks in the room who are really opening up amazing doors. I also do think there's a couple tips that I think about when I'm trying to figure out how to reconnect with different spaces, right? And some of it is going old school. And yes, I'm at the place where I'm at now, professionally working with the mayor and also running-wise, and have the fortunate ability to have sponsors. It's all because of the networks that I bring and the work that I put in. A big piece of connecting and cultivating relationships is also learning when to step up and when to step back. You want to hold space for folks and support them, but there's also really important power in stepping back and just kind of letting the environment and things come to you. I think society often paints this picture of what a leader is, and it's someone who is talking the most, often in front of a crowd, giving directions, but sometimes the leader is the person who is the quietest, the person who listens more than they speak, and the person who steps back to create that space for others to step forward and participate. And I think in the workforce, in the space that we're trying to get to, it's really important to balance those two notions. And I think that's a big piece of connecting and reconnecting in cultivating the network is think about how to connect with folks who are not like you, right? It's easy to surround ourselves with folks who we agree with or we have similarities with. And there's a big difference between surrounding yourselves with people and liking people and enjoying their time, right? But it's really important, especially in this day and age, to build a network around folks that you don't always agree with and you don't always think like you, because it's important to get those perspectives. And it's also really stimulating to be in a space where folks are challenging your thoughts and vice versa. And to me, that is the definition of a really healthy network. The last thing I wanted to share is just this piece around expectations. And much like leadership, expectations means a lot of things to different people. Family at times, they create these different set of expectations for us. Think about, how about, let's just eliminate that box. Imagine what a world would look like if that box didn't even exist. And we weren't bound by these boundaries that a box puts around us. And I'm going to talk really personal about folks who are in the room, respect for the folks in this room who work with passion and integrity. So please don't take this as a knock against folks who are in this space. But for the folks particularly who have vision loss, don't let folks put those boxes around you. So really push back and challenge folks. And again, that work is important, but there's all these other things that we could be doing. And it's really important to find joy and passion in what you do. And on the drive up yesterday from Boston to here, I was listening to a podcast. But they made this comment in the podcast about if someone invites you to do something, think about if you would do that tomorrow. And if you are, then do it. If you're not, turn it down. It did make me think around the choices I've made in employment and the career paths and the people I've tried to surround myself with. And it's really important to kind of think about the passion that you bring and the expectations that people put around you, and more importantly, your own expectations. And it's so important to create those expectations for yourself and don't let others do it. And this plays out in the workforce, in the running space. I've had plenty of people who come to me and said, oh, don't do this race, because I do more trail running than road running right now. And folks have said, oh, don't do this race, it's too challenging, it's too technical. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you just made me actually want to do it a whole lot more. And no joke, I am not perfect. I can be the bitter and vindictive. And I have a list of race directors who've told me which races not to do, and I'm checking that list off. And I'm going to those races because absolutely they are not making choices for me. I make those choices, I set the expectations that I want. And the reason why I get to those expectations is because all the great work that's happening in this room and happening in so other communities, I've been able to lean into and gain a tremendous amount of experience and support from these networks. And through that, collectively, I've been able to kind of reconnect with the folks who I wanted to spend time with. And I've been able to use that motivation to set great expectations for myself, which then I'm able to kind of pursue a much more joyful time, whether it's work or running and so forth.